Let's talk about how to make almost any syrup you might need for making cocktails at home. Most cocktails, both classic and modern, contain sugar in one form or another. There are exceptions, of course, such as whiskey and soda, but these are just that, exceptions, and mostly any other cocktail necessarily contains sweet vermouth, sherry, liqueur, tonic, pop soda, honey or syrup. Naturally, you can buy almost any syrup in the store nowadays, and their quality can be high, but as you know, nothing compares to the feeling of having made something with your own hands. And also, you can always adapt the recipe to your taste, so hit like and let's go! The most commonly used and versatile syrup for cocktails is simple syrup. It is essentially just sugar in liquid form. In all recipe books you can find cocktail recipes where you add sugar directly to cocktails and then you have to shake or stir the whole thing vigorously to dissolve the sugar into the liquid. And sugar is notoriously bad at dissolving in cold liquids, so people came up with much more convenient way to sweeten cocktails: dissolve sugar in water beforehand. Simple sugar syrup is very easy to make, just add granulated sugar to equal amount of hot water, by mass. So for example 100 grams of sugar to 100 milliliters or grams of water. Stir until it dissolves, and that's it. The convenience of simple syrup is that it doesn't have to be boiled in a pot, and you can just add sugar to hot or even cold water to the bottle and shake it vigorously. The colder your water, the more vigorous your shake has to be. Simple syrup is also great as a base for many other flavor syrups. For example, if you add a vanilla pod sliced lengthwise to it and let it sit for a couple of hours, you'll get vanilla syrup, which can be used in lemon pie or porn star martini. Break a cinnamon stick into it instead, and you have cinnamon syrup, which is great for something like Fall from the Tree with applejack and apple juice. Add thyme or rosemary leaves and you'll have a great twist on the whiskey sour. Add thyme or a rosemary whiskey sour. Or you can add a handful of mint leaves, simmer with the syrup for 10 minutes, strain, and you have a ready-made mint syrup for a mojito or a mint julep if you don't have a fresh mint or are afraid of spanking it. Instead of simple syrup, you can make rich simple syrup. For this you're gonna need to add twice as much sugar to hot water, for example 200 grams of sugar per 100 milliliters of water. Unlike regular simple syrup, you won't be able to simply pour boiling water into the sugar, because a large amount of sugar quickly cools down the water, so you'll have to use a pot and a stove. Stir until the sugar dissolves and you're done. Personally, I prefer using rich simple syrup because it adds the same amount of sugar to the cocktails, but with less dilution. However, you should take into account that although you added twice as much sugar, it's not gonna be twice as sweet as simple syrup, but about 1/3 sweeter, because sugar gives the syrup its own volume. That is, instead of 15 milliliters of simple syrup, you're gonna need to use about 10 milliliters of rich simple syrup to get the same sweetness. Talking about syrups without additional flavors, we should also mention gum syrup. It is practically a rich simple syrup, but more viscous, so it gives cocktails more silky texture and mouthfeel. To make it, you're gonna need 25 grams of gum arabic, which is widely used in the food industry as a thickening agent for candies and toppings, to which pour about 60 milliliters of hot water. Stir thoroughly and leave for a couple of hours until gum arabic absorbs water and the mixture starts to resemble glue. Heat up 120 milliliters of water, add 200 grams of sugar and the gum arabic mixture. Simmer until everything dissolves completely, and, if necessary, filter through a cheesecloth to get rid of lumps. And here it is, the gum syrup. It is pretty thick, as you can see. This syrup can be found in old cocktail recipe books, it was pretty popular back then. Also, the authors of the recipe book for Archer TV series love it for some reason, I've made a video about that. Personally, I find it excessive and prefer to use rich simple syrup instead. Before we continue, I'd like to remind you that if you want to see videos about something specific, let me know in the comments below. Also, if you want to support my channel, you can join the Patreon or become a YouTube member. All the links are in the description to this video, as well as the text recipes of everything I make on this channel. Thanks. Honey syrup is also quite popular for cocktails like bee's knees with gin, penicillin with Scotch whiskey and ginger liqueur, Gold Rush with bourbon, Derby with gin and mint, and many others. It is also very easy to make. You mix honey and boiling water in the ratio that you prefer. Usually people use 1 to 3 parts of honey per 1 part of water. I prefer somewhere around 1 part water to 2 parts honey, but that depends on the intensity of flavor of your honey. So keep in mind that different types of honey and harvested at different times of the year will have different flavor profile and nuances, so maybe the ratio should be different for different types of honey. Now let's talk about the syrup, the name of which still confuses a lot of people. Thanks for that Coco Lopez, who decided that calling coconut syrup cream of coconut would be a good idea. It is important to remember that cream of coconut is not coconut cream. Coconut cream is made by skimming off the top fattest layer of chilled coconut milk, and cream of coconut is sweetened coconut milk. It's very easy to make. Just take coconut milk, pour it in the pan, and mix in the exact amount of sugar by weight, in my case 300 grams of each. Don't boil the mixture, just mix until the sugar dissolves. Then sterilize the bottle with boiling water and pour the liquid into it. It is better to store in the fridge, but do not be surprised that your coconut syrup thickened and became similar to condensed milk. That's normal. Cream of coconut is used to make many delicious cocktails, the most popular being piña colada with rum and pineapple, but there are also creamy coconut margarita, coconut martini, bushwhacker drink. I made a whole video about cocktails with this syrup, check it out. Next in line is perhaps the most popular syrup in the world, aside from simple syrup, Grenadine. There are two types of Grenadine that go by the same name and confuse novice bartenders. Originally, Grenadine is pomegranate syrup consisting of sugar and pomegranate juice, and that's it. But whether pomegranates are not readily available everywhere or for some other reason, many commercial Grenadine syrups don't have any pomegranate in them, but a mixture of berry flavors like strawberry, raspberry, blueberry and others. By and large, there's nothing criminal about that, just check the ingredients if you buy syrup in the store. And I'll tell you how to make the real Grenadine, not some berry nonsense. Put a saucepan on the lowest heat and pour 500 ml of pomegranate juice, which you can press yourself or buy in the store. It shouldn't contain anything but pomegranate, no sugar, not anything else. Natural juice is often more brown than red, but it doesn't affect the taste in any way. I like to add spices to my Grenadine, break a cinnamon stick, a star anise, 2 cloves, and the zest of 1 orange. Then add 600 grams of sugar, a little more than juice, and a teaspoon of hibiscus. You can use just juice and sugar if you want, everything else is optional. Stir for 15 to 20 minutes while warming up the liquid, but don't bring to a boil. Usually 60 degrees centigrade is enough. Strain the syrup through a cheesecloth and pour it into the bottle that's been sterilized with boiling water. You can store this syrup like all the others for at least a month in the fridge, probably for longer. As you can see, the color is not as red as commercial syrup, but the taste is much better. You can make many cocktails with Grenadine, tequila sunrise with orange juice, hurricane with rum, orange and passion fruit, Jack Rose with apple brandy, El Presidente with rum, dry vermouth and orange curacao, and many others. Just as I said, it's one of the most popular syrups in the world. Orgeat or Orgeat is an almond syrup that is used in a large number of cocktails: Mai Tai, Fog Cutter with rum, cognac gin and sherry, Trinidad Sour with Angostura and bourbon, and many others. It's a little more complicated to make than the others, but still nothing too fancy. The most difficult part in making Orgeat is to remove the skin from the almonds, that is, if you bought them unpeeled. Pour boiling water over the almonds, wait for a couple of minutes, drain, and then pour room temperature water. It helps removing the skin from almonds a lot. When the almonds are peeled, lightly roast them on high heat on a dry pan. This helps to enhance their flavor. Try not to burn your almonds, just brown them a little bit. Transfer the almonds to a blender and grind them into crumbs, but not too much. That's the coarseness we need. Then mix 1 part of water with 1 part sugar, grate about 1 teaspoon of orange zest, and add the ground almonds. Stir and leave it with lid on until it cools down completely, for about 2 or 3 hours. Then strain the syrup through a cheesecloth. As the syrup is thick and reluctant to strain, you can help yourself with a spatula and then squeeze out the rest. Add a little brandy or cognac for flavor, about 10 milliliters, a third of an ounce is enough, especially as we have only 100 milliliters of syrup. Stir and pour into a bottle or a jar, or whatever you prefer. I prepared a small volume of Orgeat, but you can safely double or even triple the amount of water and sugar to get more syrup. The amount of other ingredients can remain the same. Also, you can use half a teaspoon of orange blossom water instead of orange zest, but I didn't have any and it's even more fun with the zest. For some reason I don't understand, there are very few apple-flavored cocktails. Apart from apple teeny and something like Fall from the Tree, one of which I made on this channel. I can't even think of any. But why? Apple cocktails are great. Apple flavor goes well with Calvados or Applejack, for obvious reasons, and also goes well with whiskey, sparkling wine, vanilla, cinnamon, caramel. Honestly, apple makes everything better. Plus, making apple syrup is so easy, it's almost illegal. Into a saucepan, pour 1 liter of apple juice, clarified or cloudy doesn't matter, and boil until its volume decreases by 5 to 6 times. Pour it in a bottle, sterilized with boiling water, and add granulated sugar. For 200 ml of evaporated juice, you're gonna need about 100 to 150 grams of sugar. More will not dissolve because the juice already contains sugar. Shake the bottle until the syrup is mixed, and that's it. You can add a cinnamon stick if you want, but I don't want it. Besides the sweetness and flavor of apple, this syrup has quite a lot of acidity, so you can simply dilute it with carbonated water and get an awesome apple lemonade. But when making cocktails, where the syrups are traditionally just sweet without acid, this is a point to consider. I had a video about Halloween cocktails in 2023, and there I made a cocktail of my own invention, which everyone was absolutely delighted with. It was called the Apple Crush, and I highly recommend it. It contains Calvados, Aperol, dry hard cider, this apple syrup, and my homemade pumpkin spice cinnamon syrup. Speaking of which, to make pumpkin spice syrup, we'll need a pumpkin pie spice mix, which you can either buy ready-made or make yourself. A half a teaspoon of cloves, just the heads, half a teaspoon of ground ginger, half a teaspoon of ground nutmeg, half a teaspoon of allspice, it's optional but recommended, and 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, or 1 cinnamon stick broken into pieces. Pour 200 grams of brown or white sugar into 200 ml of water and add all the spices. Stir until the sugar dissolves, but do not boil. Turn off the heat and leave on the stove until cooled down completely. The difficulty with ground cinnamon is that it turns the liquid into jelly, so this syrup is almost impossible to filter through a paper coffee filter or a cheesecloth. But it does go through a regular sieve. If you use a broken cinnamon stick, you won't have this problem, but there's a benefit to a gooey syrup like this. It gives a nice mouthfeel to your cocktails. This pumpkin spice syrup is good for autumn cocktails, such as pumpkin martini or with apple flavors. You can also mix these two syrups, apple and pumpkin spice, and use them at once, if that's your thing. What else do we have left? Ginger syrup. Also, in many stores you can buy it, also not used very often. Usually ginger flavor is added in the form of ginger ale or ginger beer. Nevertheless, it's a very nice syrup to make at home. Peel 200-250 grams of ginger and cut into small cubes. Also grate the zest of 1 lemon, it is optional but recommended. Add chopped ginger and lemon zest to 500 ml of boiling water. Reduce the heat, cover with a lid and simmer over a low heat for 1 hour. Remove from heat and filter through a sieve. If you want to make your syrup completely clear, you can additionally filter it through a paper coffee filter, but I usually don't bother. Add the same amount of sugar as you have liquid, in my case about 300 to 400 grams, and stir until the sugar dissolves. Squeeze the juice from the remaining lemon and add it to the mixture. This is convenient if you plan to make ginger ale from your syrup. Pour the resulting syrup into a bottle and put it in the fridge. If you want to enhance the ginger flavor, you can grate fresh ginger directly into the bottle, somewhere around 20 to 30 grams, and to achieve optimal taste, it's better to wait a couple of days for the flavor of the syrup to stabilize, although it can be used immediately. If you want to make ginger ale, simply dilute the syrup 1:5 with sparkling water. It turns out much tastier and gingerier than your standard Schweppes or Canada Dry, which are the same thing. You can make a lot of cocktails with ginger ale, the Presbyterian with scotch or bourbon, Florodora with gin and raspberry syrup, different punches, or just mix it with tequila, whiskey or gin and get a buck. It's called Irish buck, gin buck, and so on. By the way, if you want me to make a proper ginger beer with ginger bug and all that jazz, tell me in the comments. Well, I hope the topic of syrups is closed for a while. Of course, you can think of many more, but usually it all comes down to making a simple syrup with some flavors added to it, like cinnamon or vanilla. Anyway, if there's anything I haven't covered, tell me in the comments below. For other videos of all sorts of homemade liqueurs, cocktail cherries, clear ice and bar secrets, check out the corresponding playlist. Drink responsibly and as always, до свидос!